Whenever you want to start.
All right. First off, if you would both say your names and spell them, please.
Quinton Higgins, I'm gonna forget my name. Quinton Higgins, Quinton, Higgins, Higgins.
My name is Judy Eberens, Judy, Eberenz.
Okay. So, Quinton, we'll start with you. And I know you've probably had to recall this a million times, but briefly.
I'll start there. Okay, keep going. Thank you, sorry.
Quinton, what do you remember from that night, leading up to the crash?
I remember we were at Kings Island. I remember it was my first time going, and I always describe it as the best day of my life turned into the worst day of my life. And went up there, spent all day, hung out with my friends, and we left the park at 9:30 and got on the bus. And it's crazy because my best friend that invited me, he died. But he went up there with a little girl, and I came back with the little girl. I was sitting with her, so I stole a girlfriend during the day. So that's the long story. It messed me up afterwards, too. But I remember we stopped at a gas station, and shortly after, we got back on the interstate, and just in the middle of the night, I was half asleep, and you felt a big thump and heard the crash, and we were all fine. We all stood up. And we all stood up on the bus, and then next thing you know, it's pitch black, you can't see. And then within, for me, it was like 10 seconds, you heard all the kids start screaming and crying, and you seen the glow of the fire up in the front of the bus. And once you realize that there was nowhere to go, because those old buses didn't have the emergency windows and all that on it, so it was just the front door, which fire was at the front. So everyone turned around and immediately tried to go out the back door. I was sitting 6 seats behind the driver, and naturally, you're not going to go anywhere with 67 people on a bus. So after about 20 seconds, you felt the heat. The heat started just melting your skin. And I remember just starting to scream and cry and telling everybody to get out of the way, and I passed out. And I remember it was one doctor told me when I got here, it was a couple days later, the reason I didn't get burned real bad, because it's crazy, I passed out and laid on the floor. This is why my hands and my arms got burned real bad. But I always equate, I should have died to me, because I laid on the floor and I don't remember hearing the kids. I don't remember getting stepped on, but something told me to get up. And somehow I got up and I got to the back door. I don't remember how. I remember sticking my arm out through the kids, and a truck driver that was passing by pulled me off the bus. Now, it's crazy because I was kind of out of it, and I got a scar on my knee, and I joke with my kids about it because I hate looking at the scar. Because the scar, and then my daughter's like, why is that? Because I woke up when I hit the ground. And that's when I looked around and I seen all the chaos. And as a 15-year-old kid, you don't understand what just happened. And then right after that, some lady grabbed me and pulled me to the media and laid me down. And keep in mind, we didn't have cell phones, but I'm telling her, please, somebody go find my parents, go do something. And she's trying to talk to me, keep me from going into shock or whatever, and talking about my family. Next thing I know, I hear the ambulance coming. And it was crazy because it was an ambulance. I remember this was an ambulance from Carrollton. They came, and back then they had them old gurneys. I don't know what they even are, but they just raised up and down. The guys picked it up and it fell because they were rushing. And it woke me up again. He picked it up and put me in, and they drove me to Carrollton. The hospital was already full because they took the kids that were not hurt. They got off. They took them to Carrollton first. So after that, that's how I ended up here. I ended up having to take the ride from Carrollton in the ambulance here. And I remember getting here. I remember talking in the ambulance. Man, I didn't feel any pain. I felt fine. I'm still trying to tell somebody to get my parents. I remember getting in the emergency room, and this is when it got real for me. I didn't know when you get burned, they pour saline solution on you. I got in here, and I'm trying to talk and sit up. I had old cut-off jeans and a t-shirt, and they cut my clothes off. And I'm thinking, uh-oh, something's wrong. So next thing I know, they started pouring bottles of saline over my arms, and it started stinging, and that's when I knew I was hurt. So after I blacked out, and I woke up, tube in my mouth, and I couldn't speak, and just pain in my chest. By that time, my parents got here. My dad was standing over me crying, and the history of my dad, he was an alcoholic at the time, And my dad never showed emotion, never cried. And I'm trying to figure out why this man's crying. Because I didn't, at that time I was already drugged up, didn't feel the pain, I just knew I couldn't speak. And my mom, I saw her off to the side, people holding her up. And I'm trying to figure out what is wrong with my mom. And I found out, I think it was like the next day, I heard the doctors talking. They told my parents I probably was going to die because my lungs were so bad. They said, you know, he could go either way for about 2 weeks until we can get the tube out because he can't breathe on his own. So I remember the worst thing after the first initial days. Memories, man. The first initial days were, for a week, they were taking the tube in and out and being heartbroken because after about 2 days, I knew what it was and I wanted it out. And they took it out on and off, and the doctor's like, he just can't, he's not.
You're not sliding.
Yeah, he's not breathing, so it's got to go back in. And I don't know if you, what went through my head, my body, the pain, like, oh, they got to put it back in. So it was just a week long of in and out doing that, and my parents looking at me trying to figure out. And my dad, he would always look at me, and I still, even when they took it out for a brief moment, I couldn't speak. And I remember I would have tears in my eyes. And my dad, being the way he was, and he would look and he said, "Why are you crying?" And I'm thinking, y'all don't understand, you know, what I'm going through. So the happy time was initially, I think it was about 7 or 8 days later, a tube came out, and they started feeding me, and they put protein in all our food, which was gross. And that's how I discovered the McDonald's here. So now I got a picture. I don't know if she sent you the picture.
Yeah, I saw. Yes.
But one of the girls actually were visiting some of the kids, and she snuck me a fillet of fish. And that was the first time I had a fillet of fish.
Shut the door. We didn't tell.
So,
We didn't tell on anybody, did we?
So yeah, it was. After that, it just became home in a sense for me because it seemed like a lifetime from being at Kings Island that day to the crash happening to being in the hospital. Then what really was 2 weeks into it, man, it just felt like a lifetime because you're here. You know, as a kid, you're used to getting up every day, going to play, go to school, do whatever, and then you're stuck here with all these injuries. But the nurses would come in, and this one here, like I said, her smile, she would come in and just smile and talk, and she was the main one that I would talk to all the time. And I was told I asked her to marry me because I was on morphine.
Would you?
So,
I'm already married.
So yeah, it
And
just.
we sing. I remember singing when we would have to clean your arms and your hands because he hated the. Back then, it's much better now
Yeah.
because of the medicines and the equipment we have now. But we would have to give him some pain medicine and then scrub his arms and his hands, and it's painful. It bleeds.
Yes.
Then you put the saline on it, and it hurts. But then when you get it all cleaned and dressed back up, it doesn't feel so bad. But we would sing, and I wish I could remember some of the things we would sing. Come on, sing with me, because the singing was good for his lungs, but it was also a distraction, and I can't sing worth a lick. And they would make fun of me until, we would all be laughing and carrying on because we had to have some kind of diversion or distraction.
I remember you guys would bring in this little, it's sucking and blow a little. Yes, that was. I'm like, I can't do it, and that was constant while I was here. Well, actually, it became home. So actually, I hadn't been here since the crash, really.
We'll jump to that. I want to jump back a little bit. So, Judy, give us your perspective of that night.
Okay, it was crazy. It was not my weekend to work. I was at home. Well, my husband and I had been out to dinner with some friends, and when you get home at night, you turn on the news while you're getting ready for bed, and I see it on the news. So I immediately looked at my husband and said, I have to go. So you're always taught to call, because if they don't need you, you're the type of services that you can provide, then it's best if people stay away, because sometimes you get an influx of people and it's not the right mix of people. So when I called the house supervisor, I just said, this is Judy, I work in the ICU, and I have burn unit experience, do you need me? And they were like, yes. So I can remember coming in, at that time the ICU in this building was on the 3rd floor, and coming up the visitor elevator, to the staff elevators to the 3rd floor, and walking in that direction. And the first thing that I can remember right away was the smell. Just the smell and the sounds and the crying of all these people. We have a little miniature triage section set up where Dr. Fallon, one of our surgeons, was doing bronchoscopies and figuring out where kids needed to go. So all I can remember thinking about is the overwhelming feeling of how am I going to be able to help anybody in this chaos. And it almost felt like it was almost like a controlled chaos, because there were obvious leaders like the doctors. Sis Grubel was my nurse manager at the time in the ICU. And when she saw me, she put a tag on me and said, you're going to this room and this room. And the two rooms that I were assigned to, one was Quinton and the other one was Harold Dennis.
Okay.
And so then every time I came to work, I worked 24 hours that first night and was off a couple days. And when I came back, every time I came back to work, my assignment was with me and another nurse with Harold and Quinton. So we got to know each other very well. As a young nurse, it was scary. And I can remember thinking and talking to my mom and thinking that these kids' lives are changed forever, but so is ours. None of us had ever witnessed anything like we saw that night. Nothing. I mean, you can't describe it.
So, do you think Quinton was going to live?
It was pretty scary. When he had his bronch and came into the room, what I can remember thinking about his lungs was, this is not good. I could see like the plastic on his teeth and in his mouth, and the charring around his mouth. And what we figured out, it was the seats melted, and they inhaled all that flying around. Have you ever seen a fire and things fly in the air? That's what we think. We weren't there, so we weren't on site, so we don't know. But what we were getting out of these kids' lungs it was plastic-like kind of material. And then the toxins, obviously, from all that stuff burning, and then they're inhaling that. The one thing I was glad to see is that when we got him all settled in, that he didn't have any burns on his face or his neck, which is critical to your airway. So we were like, yes, that's one plus in his direction. But his lungs were so much worse than Harold's lungs. Harold's lungs weren't great, but they weren't near like Quinton's. But Harold had all the facial, neck, and chest burns that you worry then for secondary swelling and things like that. So I'll bet you guys were in our unit 6-8 weeks, I'm guessing.
Yeah. Wow.
And so for 6-8 weeks, to always be assigned to the two, kiddos, and remembering the intubating, extubating, intubating, extubating, and and finally I can remember one of the doctors saying, "We need to stop. That's got to mess," because it felt like a failure. I'm failing them because I can't breathe, but he couldn't breathe because his lungs were terrible. And then on the flip side, walking into Quinton's room, and we covered mirrors, we covered everything because he was burned horrifically on his face. And I can remember Jan Bear was the other nurse. Me, Jan, and Debbie were the three nurses, and Donna took care of these two guys, and being there when when Harold wanted to see his face for the first time, and standing there and taking the bandages off and talking to him about it, and this is what you're going to see, and this is what it's going to look like, and being in the room with him, and and they wanted us in there. When big things happened, they wanted us in their rooms with them. And just and remembering that, and then remembering how happy it was that he went 24 hours, and it was like, okay, if he goes, and I'm thinking I'm going home at 7 in the morning. If I come back tonight, he should not have that tube still. And walking in and thinking, and my heart pounding, walking to his room, hoping that when I opened that door, that tube would still be out. And we had like a party and celebrate it, and I think we had cake, and we did all kinds of crazy fun stuff. So. Their lives haven't changed forever, but ours were definitely changed because we were all young and had never seen anything like that. Yes.
Pictures.
How long had you been a nurse when this happened?
I started here in 1983.
Okay. So you still a youngin'. You're in your 20s?
Mm-hmm. I'm 27, something like that. I love that picture.
It's awesome.
So, talk a little bit more about the bond that you all developed, and both of you chime in here.
For me, it was just say it this way. It's kind of like my mom. You know, I was looking at the pictures, and the rooms were so small, and like I said, we couldn't go anywhere.
Very
Like I said,
small.
them coming in every day, you know, seeing a smiling face is I cannot explain. I say it this way. This is what I feel when I got a 10-year-old.
Would you bring the Cardin family in? I don't want. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
When I've got a 10-year-old, you know, I anticipate seeing her every day when I get home. You know, being here for so long, you know, it's not like they would walk in the room. You know, they would come in smiling when inside we're dying.
Right.
So you know, you look forward to it, and so it was just kind of like.
And it was, for me, the bond started immediately.
Okay.
Because we celebrated very small victories, and at first they were very small. There was nothing that was, you know, that you could go, yes, we're going to get through this. They were very small. We took it one step at a time. And I think that when you're allowed that opportunity to care for one child, and every time you're there, it's undeniable. I mean, I felt like I got to know his parents and his family, and then, you know, there were so many, it was my job to keep him safe and healthy during my shift, but it was also my job to worry about how was he feeling about all of his friends, because all that, you have to think about all that unfolding in an ICU, and everywhere you looked, because if you remember, your room had those 3 windows.
Mm-hmm.
And there were times that we distracted them from looking out the windows because a family was grieving right outside their window, and he knew them. It just was an incredible feeling sometimes of doom and gloom, but I couldn't let that happen for him. He had to see me on my game so that I could make him on his game. And that's how we just worked. And like I said, we did all kinds of crazy singing
I
and
had,
songs, and, you know.
I think it might have been 4 days later, Katrina McNichol. Because some of us, if I remember,
Donna took care of Katrina.
I don't know if we were all in the same room for a minute,
You were.
but I remember she come in and we were beside each other. We looked as kids, you look at each other. And I remember she's looking at me and she goes, "Are you okay?" And I'm looking at her. I'm like, "I don't know. Are you okay?" And then they took her somewhere, and just like I said, I think that was one of the first times I've seen it, my nurse. But I remember when I got home, when I left here, I was scared to death to leave out of the doors. My parents, it took me probably 10 minutes to walk across the street to the Ronald McDonald house where they were parked. When I got home, I took out all these pictures. My dad, like I said, for some reason took these pictures. And I'm just thinking of it now, you know, for 28 years.
Mm-hmm.
This woman's face has been a comfort to me, because we still go through a lot. You know, actually, in a crazy way, we go through more now than we did as kids, because we never spoke. A lot of us never spoke about it. And for me, you know, like I said, seeing this picture, you know, I keep it sacred. You know, I take it out and I'll talk to it and I'll say thank you, because I remember the joy that she always had. You know, you don't find that. I mean, I was a CNA for 4 years. You know, I worked in hospitals. I'm a bus driver now. I'm around a lot of stuff, and the world is not like it was.
No.
So, like I said, for you guys to see something that crazy and to give us that kind of joy was, I don't think you can
1988 was a different time, wasn't it?
I don't think they could ever imagine what they did
No.
for all of us. You know, us, we have a private, out of 40 survivors, we have a private Facebook page. There's 32 of us on it. Only about 10 of us talk, but the one thing we talk about, especially starting in May, we'll talk about our nurses and, you know, what they meant to us. You know, and I'll put on the private page, I'll put my picture up.
Yeah.
And then I'll post it on my public page, but then we'll talk. The McDonald's here was huge, and we'll just talk. But like I said, this was home for us. You know, when I got out, Harold was here for 3 months.
Right.
You know, and then he was back and forth for like 3-4 years.
Yes.
Wow.
So like I said, I was one of the fortunate ones, because I really was not here as long as most of them were. And went through. I didn't go through any surgery or anything. But this place just held such a special time for us, you know, these nurses.
Judy,
Same for us.
I imagine it had to be mixed feelings. I know you had discussed how you felt when you left. And I'm sure there's that sense of accomplishment, but there's also that sense of loss. I mean, when
Yeah.
you spend that much time caring for somebody, I imagine that's a pretty tight bond.
And it really was, and then it felt like it was over, but it really wasn't over. So the hospital did a good job. They had lots of sessions for us to like debrief and talk, and kind of because it was almost, they went through a trauma, but so did we, because the likes of that crash is nothing like anyone had ever seen in this building before, ever, with that many people flooding, you know, and it being, and things are always scarier in the middle of the night, and here it was dark, and thinking these kids are up on 71, and how are we going to get them here in time to save their lives? And you know, being at home getting ready for bed, to flipping that mode, and you know, and being here. So yeah, so just it's probably been 3 years or 4 years ago when you put the picture, and he put this
3
picture
years
up online, and as soon as I saw his name, I was like, that's my Quinton. And the next thing I see is this picture popping in, and he says, "Does anyone remember this nurse's name?" And I texted back, "That's me. That's me. That's us, Quinton. That's us."
And that's the first time you all had connected since?
Yes. Yeah.
Wow.
And this is the first time I
Yeah.
got to see her.
Yeah.
Today?
So
Yeah,
so we
today's the
talk
first
on
time.
Facebook all
Yeah,
the
we
time.
talk on Facebook. This is
Yeah.
the first time I got
Oh my
to
goodness,
Yeah.
I had no idea.
And Harold, I see him more. He played football at UK, and we
Okay.
have season football tickets at UK. So I would run into him all the time, and he would, and every time he sees me, he just starts laughing like, I can't believe, like, really that we get to see each other.
Goodness.
And so today in the lobby, I was just watching because I saw you first, and then I'm looking, I'm like, oh my God, you all, and nobody, the girls that I was standing with didn't know you. I'm like, that's Quinton. They were like, who's Quinton? I was like, he's a bus crash. So I'm pulling out my phone trying to get on Facebook to pull up his page to see if he's got a thing on there saying I'm here. So as soon as it was over, so then all of a sudden you moved to let a kiddo come through, and I was like, he left. He left before I got to talk to him. And then about that time he popped up back around the corner, so I was like, yeah. So I couldn't wait for him to meet Sis, and I know he doesn't really remember Sis because she was the manager of the unit. But
No, there's only 2 people I remember, and honestly, it was you. And I wish I knew this nurse's name, but I don't. There was a little black nurse here, and I ain't gonna lie. I joke about, because I do a lot of public speaking, but I did not like this woman. And it was from like I said, from a kid's mindset, because what it was, the scrubbing.
yeah,
And seriously, she come in my room and she scrubbed my hands like no other. And you know what she said to me after, I don't know how many days it was, but she looked at me and goes, I would ball. And she said, you know why I do this? Because she would do certain things that a lot of them didn't do. And honestly, she goes, black people scar worse.
yeah.
And she goes, I don't want you to have anything to look at. But to a 15-year-old, I still hated that lady.
She would tell us that, and I need to go back and look through my pictures, but I can't remember exactly who it was.
And what it was, she
Well,
would
she might have
scrub.
been
She
Bernie
didn't
instead,
talk
yeah.
while she was doing. Like I said, they would talk and
Yeah.
do stuff, and I think that's what happened, the disconnect. But when I remember when I left, they were all standing in a circle, and we all said bye. But I spoke, I think, but I didn't say nothing to that lady because I didn't like her. So I always tell my mom, I said, I wish I could find that lady again. But yeah, it was like I said, just so many memories, being here. And
Like literally, like every time I see him, my mind immediately goes back to me standing in that hallway that night before I met him,
Really?
and just looking. I mean, I could tell you probably what people were wearing and what people were saying, but like the overwhelming, that smell and just the utter chaos of it all, and trying to think, how am I going to be able to help anybody? Look at that. And we didn't get all the kids. Some of the kids went to
Yeah.
university, some went to Carrollton, but it was just, it was we know how it impacted their lives, but it impacted
I
ours.
would say that honestly, you helped by your smile.
Ah, thanks.
She did. I mean, the joy that she brought in the room was just unbelievable. Like I said, I could deal with anything. She'd come in happy and smiling, and it just took me to another world.
And I liked my job today as much as I liked it then. So
That blows my mind that you're still
Yeah.
here. So, yeah.
Well, I'll wrap it up on this because
Okay.
I mean I know we could talk for hours.
Yeah.
Absolutely. but I also know that you all have things to do, and you all have things to do, and I don't want to keep you all here forever.
Bus kids.
But
Did you know
What-
Chuck real well?
No.
Keita?
Mm-mm.
He was, I was gonna say, he was one of the youth.
He was a youth leader at the time.
His wife and me grew up together.
Really?
In the same church. And I remember that morning flipping on TV and, hearing all this. And Robbie was toddling around and stuff, and it was like I think it was on Robbie's birthday that the crash happened.
May
You know.
14th?
Well, his was within a day or two.
Yeah, yeah.
So, but I just remember, thinking, here is this little kid, fighting to stay alive, and then you got somebody that did that to these kids that were, healthy and just enjoying life, and it just tore me up. And of course, at the time, we didn't know about Chuck,
Oh, right.
but because, and his wife has told me details on some stuff, that she was told later, and it was just.
No, unfortunately, I actually didn't belong to the church. I was an accident, and I got invited. My best friend that died, Anthony Marks, he took his mom to the church for Mother's Day, and he found out about the trip. And he come back. We lived in a mobile home park. Me, Harold, and Darren Jaquez down the street, and Andy come back and told us about it. He said, "Let's go," and we all cut grass for a weekend to get money, and then we camped out the night before in somebody's yard, and we went. So, like I said, it's just then happened.
so, each of you, both of you, what's your biggest message from all of this? Your experience, whether it, was the crash, the night, the bond that you all formed. If you could just put it all together, what is the one takeaway?
I guess from a nursing perspective, it would be to keep an open heart and an open mind, and do the things that you can do to make an impact. And obviously, he remembers me smiling all the time. And if you ever see me, I'm rarely without it. I guess it would be just to keep an open mind and open heart, because there were people in our unit that struggled, and maybe I didn't know any better. I just went in that room and did what someone told me to do. Maybe I was in shock as much as they were, because we had never seen that. But yeah, just accept the challenge and have faith in God that He's going to help us, lead us through.
And for me, I always go back and remember, because it's crazy because all of us have a form of PTSD. I jump time period, so to speak. When I think about the crash a lot, I don't go from getting out of the hospital to going home. I go back to being here and what I felt. And like I said, I was CNA for 4 years, and then I worked at the hospital for 3 years. And you don't see the compassion nurses have. And growing up and become 44, becoming who I am now, I actually think part of me is because of how they took care of us. We didn't leave here broken, so to speak. We were broken, but we wasn't as broken as we could be. And for me, I'm sure if you could talk to all the survivors, like I said, when we found out about the McDonald's closing down, we got on Facebook and we talked on our private page for doggone an hour. And I'm crying, and some of them texting, we're crying. And it's just, we grew up, in a sense, being here. And so...
And we did too.
So going through life, I am so glad. It's crazy that I had that picture to hold on to. Even though I didn't know her personally all these years, but seriously, I would take this picture out and just look at it and this is a woman that took care of me. So for me, I learned a lot from being here. And throughout my life, I struggled with it until I was 33. And so it's just, I'm thankful for this hospital and for people like Judy, nurses like her and Donna.
Wow.
So when I talk, like I said, I go in schools now,
Yeah.
churches, all over the place and speak, and her name gets mentioned, her pictures get shown. I mean, no matter where I go, I carry my pictures and I tell people about this time. But I wouldn't be able to do this if they didn't take such good care of us.
Oh, I love you.
Thank you both. I mean, that's incredibly powerful, and I think these are the types of stories that we want to share because they are the ones that truly make a difference. So, thank you.
Thank you.
I will be in touch.
Okay.
As I said, in May, I would love.
Oh, yeah.
I've got 3 reporters at the top of my head that I know would just run with this like crazy.
Well,